It's a privilege for me to minister from Pastor Ondachi's pulpit. I consider him a friend, and many people do not relinquish their pulpits. And so if I say anything that is contrary to what he teaches, believe him, not me, because I'm going to be gone. And as Pastor mentioned, we've been married 33 years, and we have 3 grown children. Our youngest one is third year in college, and our first 2 are working. The topic for us today is raising amazing teenagers. I would probably subtitle it by calling it Understanding Your Adolescent. Understanding Your Adolescent. And many adolescents feel misunderstood. As a matter of fact, many of them are not understood. Because the parents are going through a stage of life where the pressure on their life is coming from every direction. Those of you who teach in schools or who lead schooling institutions will know that when you call parents of young children to come to school, they all show up. When you call parents of teens to come, only a handful show up. Parents who are raising teenagers are at a stage of life where the demands of career are at their peak. Your employer wants your time, and you are trying to make a name for yourself. And because this adult-sized teenager is big enough to be like an adult, you assume he can take care of himself. And so the tension is there. And for the typical Kenyan family, that teenager is in boarding school. And so you have the privilege, or the misfortune, let me put it that way, of only spending 3 months a year with your teen. The couple before us said they have 2 years with a 16-year-old, and I agree. But if that 16-year-old is in boarding school, you only have 3 months a year over the next 2 years. Friends, you can choose who to marry. You can choose when to marry. You can choose when to have children. You can even choose how many. But once you have them, you cannot choose when to raise them. And if you don't raise them, they will still grow. But you may not like what you get. This morning, we're going to be talking about understanding your teen in an attempt to raise these amazing teenagers. Let me begin by saying that all human behavior is purposeful. People do what makes sense to them. People filter their desires through their perspectives and values, and they come up with behavior. And by behavior, I mean the words and actions that they believe will get them what they want. Parents of teenagers have great intentions, but the teenagers do not experience your intentions. They experience your actions. And we need to be aware that the way people experience us is not always the way we intend to be experienced. And so when you receive feedback from people, do not be defensive. You've never experienced yourself. Others experience you. In the raising of children, and especially of teenagers, the presenting issues, the challenges you face, are rarely the issue. The presenting issues are an indication of what the real issue may be. And very often, the real issue is hidden somewhere really deep. And it takes a skillful parent to be able to tap into that teenager and find out what is really going on below the surface. If I mention the name Titanic, What comes to your mind? The Titanic. A ship. What kind of ship? A big one. And what happened to it? It sank. Unfortunately, that's all you remember about the Titanic. Nobody ever says it was the best built ship of its time, because in fact it was. So well built that those who built it said, nothing can sink this ship. And they crossed the line when they said, not even God. When you build a ship of that quality, you do not give it to an amateur crew. You give it to a team that has sailed in the past. The year was 1912. The date, April 14. The Titanic was sailing in the North Atlantic Ocean off the coast of Newfoundland. As it was sailing, the crew and the passengers saw small chunks of ice floating in the water. For any experienced crew, they should have wondered, why is this ice floating? What's ice supposed to do in water? Supposed to melt, isn't it? So when it's floating, there's one of two things. Either it's coming from a very nearby source, or the water is so cold, the ice has not had a chance to melt. Both of those should alarm the crew. Because the middle of the ocean, the source of ice is usually icebergs. The crew of the Titanic was an experienced crew. But when you are in the Titanic, the best built ship of its time, that nothing can sink, you don't worry, do you? And so it came about at 11:40 p.m., there was a slight nudge on the ship, as opposed to the kind you get when a vehicle rams the back of your ship, of your car. But you know, when you're in the Titanic, you don't worry. You don't worry. A little nudge, what's that, the Titanic? Nothing can sink this ship. Not even God. So they thought. At 2:20 a.m. on April 15, the unsinkable ship sank. What caused it to sink? Was it the floating ice that caused it to sink? No. The floating ice was an indication of what was going on underneath. There are two main reasons why that ship sank. Both were hidden from the eye. The first was the iceberg that was hidden from the visible eye by the water. Deep inside, invisible, the signs of it were the floating chunks. But the other was a lie that had been believed by the crew, that the ship was unsinkable. The ship was, in fact, sinkable. Friends, people's outward behavior is an indication of what's going on inside. Just like the floating chunks of ice were an indication that there's an iceberg nearby, people's outward behavior and people's external expressions, for the trained eye, will tell you there's something going on in the heart of this person that may be showing itself in the behavior. Two things we look for: performance and appearance. Keep in mind our topic of today, understanding your teen. Performance and appearance. We live in an age where a person is assessed by their net worth. If you have a lot of money, drive a nice car, dress well, and live in a place that is accepted to be a nice place, then you are somebody. When men meet, they want to know where each of them works, what they do. When women meet, they talk about families. Isn't that true? Here's my question. Have you noticed any sudden changes in the performance or appearance of your teenager? And as a teen sitting among us, are you experiencing sudden changes in your performance or appearance recently? When our kids were growing up, our son at age 16 had the neatest room in the house. How many of you have a 16-year-old with a neat room? Completely tidy. And he was doing it without the need of being reminded. Now, for a young man like that, if his room suddenly became unkempt, if he no longer brushed his teeth, if he no longer brushed his hair, we would know there's something going on. Because the neat room was part of his persona. But now, the sudden changes. The opposite could be true. You may have a teenager that just doesn't care about themselves. And then suddenly, one morning, everything changes. The question is, what is going on underneath the surface that's being manifested in the big changes? The unkempt room, the slothfulness in turning in their homework, obsession with hair and diet, loss of interest in appearance, a weird hairstyle, intensive competitiveness in sports and academics. Don't get me wrong, competitiveness must be there, but there's an intensity that is perhaps linked to the self-image of the child. And even when they achieve the goal they're aiming for, they are still unhappy. And you're wondering, what is going on between the surface? A teenager suddenly becomes quiet and withdrawn, or on the other hand, becomes very argumentative and always wanting to prove their point, whereas some of it is part of normal growth. The parent who is keen will notice there's something going on in this life that I must pay attention to. What's visible is only the tip of the iceberg. The real issues lie underneath. So the question you're asking is, what are the real issues? If you've got pen and paper, I'd like for you to draw an isosceles triangle. Aha. Teenagers, help your parents. An isosceles triangle. Not a right angle triangle. Isosceles triangle. Okay, it peaks like this. Okay? Flat base and peaks like that. Is that good? You can picture that? Yeah, draw for me an isosceles triangle. And then I want you to draw a waterline that only leaves the tip, a very small tip of the triangle above the waterline. We're assuming that this triangle is our iceberg and most of it is underwater. Can you follow that? Most of it is underwater. Draw a line to show the water level with only the tip above the water. Moses, are you doing good? Yeah. I can tease Moses because he's my friend. Now, I want you now to draw two parallel lines in the triangle from left to right to divide it into three portions. Draw two parallel lines in the isosceles triangle to divide it into three components. Are you doing good? Let me have a look. Yeah. You just need a waterline, eh? Need to do it. Yeah, good. Really good. Now, we're going to label those three parts. The first part, the bottom one, the big one, is A. The middle one is B. And the top one is C. Teens, are you helping your parents? Your old parents? And as you go on, we'll refer to those triangle, to those portions. Proverbs chapter 20 and verse 5. Proverbs 20 verse 5 says, "The purpose in a man's heart is like deep water, but a man of understanding will draw it out." Proverbs 20 verse 5, "The purpose in a man's heart is like deep water, but a man of understanding will draw it out." It is possible for parents to understand what's going on in the complicated heart of their teen. It is possible. But for you to be able to do that, you need to be a person of understanding. Job chapter 28 says, to shun evil is understanding. How many of you grew up in rural Kenya where you draw water from a well? Anybody? You grew up in, yeah, at the back. I'm not talking about the modern well with the electric pump. The old well where you have to lower in your bucket and then bring it up. Anybody experience that? Yeah. Now, during the dry season, the water level goes down, isn't it? The well is stressed, okay? And if you take in your bucket and you lower it really, really fast, and it touches the water, and then you bring it up really, really quickly, what happens? You get dirty water. Why do you get dirty water? Because when it hits the bottom, it splashes the water, and when you bring it up quickly, it keeps hitting the walls of the well. You actually end up with half a bucket of dirty water. But for the experienced drawer of water, they lower that bucket slowly. They can feel the tension when it touches the water. They allow it to scoop that water and bring it up slowly, and they end up with a full bucket of clean water. So out of one well, one draws half a bucket of dirty water, and another, a clean bucket, a full bucket of clean water. Is the problem the well or the drawer? It's the drawer. The purpose in a man's heart is like deep waters, but a man of understanding will draw it out. Here's a question for you parents. Do you get half a bucket of dirty water from your son or daughter? Or do you get a full bucket of clean water? Let me suggest to you that you can learn the skills of drawing out a full bucket of clean water. That son, that daughter wants you to understand them, wants you to tap into them, wants you to connect with them. J.B. Phillips of the Phillips translation of the Bible says, if words are to enter men's hearts and bear fruit, they must be the right words. They must be shaped cunningly to pass through men's defenses and explode silently and effectually within. We all have an emotional body armor, and we erect it anytime we feel we are being attacked. And in many homes, children feel attacked. I didn't say they are attacked. They feel attacked. And because they feel attacked, their emotional barrier is always up. It is our responsibility as parents to shape our words in such a way that they can go past that emotional barrier and enter the heart. Part of it is making sure that we have an environment where the guard is lowered and communication with the teenager can be effective. That's our responsibility. Now remember, parents, when you are raising your little one, and at what age do babies walk? A year, 12 months, 13 months? Some a little earlier. And they begin to walk and they're going like this, and they fall. Do you spank them for falling? No. You hold their hand and encourage them, isn't it? They have never walked before. They are learning to. Now remember this, parents. Your teenager has never been a teenager before. Your 14-year-old has never been 14 before. They will make the blunders that 14-year-olds make. It's our responsibility to be there. Not always to rebuke, but to guide and to walk with them. Don't tell him, grow up. What does that mean? I'm trying, Mom. I'm doing it every day. We want them to be adults in one day, don't we? Because their slow growth is irritating us. Just like you are patient with a 2-year-old, now I suggest to you, be patient with your teenager. In a few years' time, he will be a grown-up. Thank you. Thank you. So parents need to develop skills of listening and understanding their teens. They need to communicate in such a way that the words go past the defenses of their teenagers and can get to the heart level. Let's go back to our isosceles triangle. The bottom, labeled A, I want you to label that disappointment. The A is disappointment. We are looking at understanding your teenager, but a subtopic of this would be to say we are looking at why your children do what they do. Why is it that we find it hard to understand our teens? And why is it they find it hard to understand us? Disappointment. Disappointment is the core of a person's emotional iceberg. Proverbs 20, verse 6. Proverbs 20, verse 6. A lot of people claim to be loyal and loving, but where on earth can you find one? People send you CVs, and in their CV, it looks like they can do anything and everything. In the probation period of time of employment, you realize that CV was prepared by a professional. It has nothing to do with the candidate before you. Isn't that true? On the other hand, employers promise employees benefits they hope to give, but aren't giving yet. And after probation time, the employee leaves because the employer's CV was embellished. We make promises to employees that we cannot deliver. We make promises to children which you cannot deliver. And everybody is disappointed with the other. There are three things that lead to disappointment in the home. There are many things, but I'll talk about three. The first is unfailing love. Unfailing love. A child wants to be loved at all times. As a matter of fact, we all want to be. Proverbs 19:22. Proverbs 19:22 says, "What a man desires is unfailing love." By unfailing love, we are talking about being accepted even though you are struggling. You make a blunder out there, and home is a place you can come and say, "Mom, I really messed up." And Mom will ask you, "Tell me what happened." And she will listen carefully without judging you until the whole story has been told. And then she'll help you process it. She will love you in spite of your failure. That's what I'm talking about. Teenagers are looking for that. And when they don't find it, they are disappointed. They expect to be loved when they have messed up. People expect to be loved when they have failed. Parents expect their teens to love them when they have struggled to keep their promises. Picture a young man by the name of Fred. The parents of Fred have been called by the head teacher, "Your son was caught smoking marijuana. You can come and pick him from the staff room because he's on suspension." You say, "That cannot be my son. My son cannot smoke marijuana." Haha, some parents think so. Your son can. And then you remind the teacher, "You know, there are 3 Freds in that class. Are you sure you have the right Fred?" Says, "Yes." And by calling on your last name, you know they have the right person. And so you go to school. Now tell me, parents, what's your emotional status as you're going to school? Are you a happy guy? Are you a happy mom? No. And when you get to school, what kind of words will come out of your mouth towards your child? Tell me. "You embarrassed me so much." Is that right? No. But that parent goes to Nairobi Chapel Rongai. And that parent has been reading Ephesians. And that parent knows, let no unwholesome word come out of your mouth, but only such a word as is fitting for the occasion, that may give grace to the listener. Why do such verses exist? They do exist because they prune us. When they prune us, we become fruitful in bearing the right fruit for Christ. The parent who is going to raise godly children must themselves be godly. And what better time to show your godliness than when your son or your daughter is stressed? That's the best time for your godliness to show up on the surface. And so you show up at this school, and your son says, "Dad, I know you're disappointed, but I can explain what happened." What would you do as a father? I don't want to know. I have to rush to a meeting. You drop off your son and go to a meeting. You don't really care what he's going through. You don't even know if the story is true. You've chosen to believe the school. You haven't given your son audience. Son is dropped home. Mom shows up. "Freddie, I hear you're suspended." "Yeah, Mom, but I can explain." "Okay, what happened?" Mom is more understanding. "What happened, Mom?" "It was sports day at school. There are all these kids from all over the place. And I went to the bathrooms, Mom, and there are kids from other schools and a few of my friends who are smoking. Now, as soon as I saw them, I knew there's trouble. So I turned around to leave, but they grabbed me because they knew I would report. And they put a cigarette in my mouth and told me you have to take at least one puff before we release you. Mom, I put it in my mouth, and in that moment, the teacher walked in. Mom, the truth is that I never smoked. But nobody will believe me. It is true. I had a cigarette in my hands. It is true it was on my mouth, but Mom, I never smoked. The only people who can testify are the boys who are caught with me, but none of them will. Will you believe your son? Why not? Why not? Now that's what I'm talking about. He wants to lay it bare, and he wants you to love him. They are looking for unfailing love. They are keen to tell you the challenges they are going through if you will believe them and still love them. The moment you reject that truth, they come up with a belief system. What's the point? I can tell them the truth. They'll believe anything they want to believe. What's the point? And you don't ever want your child to come to that place where they're asking, what's the point? Parents, are we together? Teenagers, am I speaking truth? Kind of, somewhat. Think about the employment at work. Suppose you're an employee at work and your leave days are over. And then your mom comes into town and she needs some medical tests. And you talk to your boss, I need a day off to take my aging mom for examination. Your boss understands, so they give you a day off. Then you come back the next day, and how did it go? Oh, it went okay. We don't have the results yet. Then the results do come 2 days later. It turns out your mom needs to go in for surgery. So you want a day off to be with your mom during surgery. Your employer gives it to you. Remember, your leave days are over. Surgery is over. Mom has been discharged. Guess what you want? A few days to be with mom to help her recover. Now your employer knows, and you know you have no more days. What do you want from your employer? You're looking for unfailing love. You're looking for grace. You want your employer to break the rules and you want them to understand what you're going through. Everybody has a mom, and everybody has the obligation of taking care of their mom, isn't it? So you want unfailing love. We don't put it that way, but that's what we want. And the understanding employer may let you, but will ask you to recover those days later. If the employer refuses, they have a right to refuse because they are governed by rules, but you'll go away bad-mouthing that employer. Isn't that true? Because they did not love you unconditionally. Am I speaking to somebody in here? Unfailing love. The second thing that brings about big disappointment is lack of significance. Lack of significance. When we belittle our children for the things they do, in our mind, we think we're belittling their work, but the child is getting belittled and feeling very insignificant. We all want to feel important to other people. Mom asks Monica to fix her cup of tea. And mom is the kind of mom that has her tea made in a very special way. She likes her cardamoms in there. She likes fresh ginger in there. She's got all sorts of mixes in there. And Monica is keen to make mom the tea. But as Monica begins to make the tea, 1 minute later, mom is asking, have you added the ginger? And before Monica can get the ginger, mom adds the ginger. 2 minutes later, Monica is about to put the tea leaves. Wait, it hasn't boiled long enough. And on it goes, and Monica says, Mom, just make the tea. I know how you like your tea. Let me make it. But Mom won't let her make it. You think next time she asks for a cup of tea, Monica is keen to make it? No. Because she's given assignments, then Mom takes them over. She feels what she does is not significant. Well, let me paint a different picture. Supposing I happen to have a very bad handwriting. Sometimes I struggle to read my own handwriting. Supposing I gave you a document with my bad handwriting, a 100-page document, and asked you to type it for me, and we negotiate a rate. What would you charge me, ma'am? How much did you say? 5,000. All right, we have a deal. You type, I pay, right? At the end of the document, I read through it. I commend you for how hard you've worked to type that horrible handwriting. I point out a few errors. You gladly correct them. I pay you your money. And then while you're watching me, I shred my document. My document, not hers, mine. I shred my document, the one she typed, and I go behind her back and delete on the computer, and I say to her, could you type this document for me one more time? Hey. Go look for someone else. Now, what's the problem? Ain't I paying? I'm paying, isn't it? So what is the problem? Why would I pay double? Okay, but supposing I told you very positive things about that document, and I said, I have a second document. Would you like to type it for me? Would you do it? Yeah. What's the difference? What's the difference? You see, it's not just about payment. When I shared my document that she has put her work into, she feels insignificant, and she will not retype it. When they give her a new document, having commended her for typing the first, she's glad to type it. So it's not about the money. It's about how she feels when I belittle what she's invested time in. Are we together on this? Her parents, do you belittle your teenager? Are you always on a rebuking mode when it comes to your teen? Does your teenager feel insignificant? Remember, we are still dealing with the bottom of the iceberg, disappointment. Are we together? We've talked about a teenagers looking for unfailing love. This is not just a teenager thing. All of us are looking for it. The scripture says, what a man desires is unfailing love. I've given you examples from the employment world. We're talking about significance. When we belittle what a person does, that person becomes disappointed. The third thing is security. Security. Relationships are supposed to be refuges. They're supposed to be secure. A home is supposed to be a place where a child can escape from the rough world out there and come home and feel secure. Some homes are rougher than the world. Is that your home? When the home is not secure, the child feels insecure. Now, let me clarify. When I talk about security, I'm not talking about burglar-proofing your house. No. I'm talking about relationships that are secure. Proverbs 14:26. Proverbs 14:26 in the King James Version says, "In the fear of the Lord is strong confidence, and his children have a place of refuge." When parents fear the Lord, they are secure, and their children have a place of refuge. Proverbs 14:26. Some people live lives as if they are always in intense competition all the time, wanting to belittle others to make them fail so they can feel superior. And it's a sad thing when a parent does that to the child. Now, I know we're talking about teenagers, but the things that are unresolved in the teenage stage of life soon show up in the young adult. The young adult soon becomes a parent. Friends, the issues that you find in marriage were not introduced by marriage. As a matter of fact, marriage has no issues of its own. But marriage reveals issues that were within the person that were never sorted out as they are growing up. And many of these issues are manifested in the teenage stage of life. Are we together on this? Or is it getting too warm? And so I want you as a parent to think far back about the disappointments that you experienced as a teenager. Can you think of one? My son shared one with me. He was in a particular school that wasn't performing very well academically. And so we took him to another school for an interview. We took him to Kilimani Junior Academy, which was not far from our house. And we go to that school on a Friday afternoon. The late Mrs. Motion that owned the school said it is not fair to interview a young boy for 1 hour and make decisions about his life. And then she said to me, "Leave him with me for a week. Let him join the class with my boys and girls. And next Friday, he'll do the exact same test as my boys and girls. Then I can assess where he is." It's a great idea, isn't it? And so Michael stayed. At the end of the week, he performed extremely well and was taken. We were elated. He was disappointed. Why do you think he was disappointed? He wasn't asked. He left his school without saying goodbye. He was the only young man in this school wearing shorts, school uniform from a different school, while others were in their own school uniform. He was able to change into home clothes, but even then, he stood out as the new one. That may look something small to you. It's not small to a teenager. This new school was costing us more money, and he was going to perform better, and he did perform very well. But without saying goodbye to his friends was a big deal. So we had to make time to take him back to his old school, spend an afternoon there saying goodbye. Disappointments. Share with me. I wish you could. No, share with your neighbor. We have time. I have an hour for my sermon. Share with your neighbor a deep disappointment you went through as a teenager. Was it a high school that you want? I never got it. You share with your neighbor. How is it affecting your view of life today? How is it affecting your relationships at work? And if you're a parent, how is it affecting your parenting? Disappointments have a way of shaping us. You go to the beach and have 6 wonderful days. On the last day, as you're walking back to your hotel, you step on a nail. You'll be unable to remember that holiday without the pain of the nail. Isn't that true? You had 6 good days. On the last day, in the last hour, that disappointment is a way of coloring everything, unless it is processed and you come to a conclusion that that hotel is not full of nails. You have to process it and come to a conclusion. Let's go to the middle part of our isosceles triangle. Number B, we're going to call that basic beliefs. Basic beliefs. When you're disappointed through life, you come up with a belief system. Maybe you worked hard and did not get the grade that you wanted, and you come to believe it is no point working hard. Or you did work hard, you got your A minus, and you're trying to please your dad, but your dad is not pleased. You come to the conclusion, it doesn't matter what I do. I will never please this man. Disappointments have a way of shaping our belief system. When disappointments accumulate, people begin to lose faith in each other. They say, it doesn't matter. I don't care about my parents, my siblings. I don't care about God, the world, my employer. They develop anger and resentment towards God, parents, siblings, the world. And a new belief system kicks in. And this is how the new belief system goes. I can come up with ways of gaining love and acceptance all by myself. I don't need you. I don't need God. I don't need anyone. I'll do it all by myself. Now, the teen may not be able to articulate it exactly like that, but they live their life with that disappointment and not wanting help from anybody. Son, can I help you? No, Dad, I'm okay. I'll figure it out myself. Son, are you okay? Yeah, Dad, I'm okay. Deep inside, he's not okay, but he believes if he tells you, you may not love him. What the teen is doing, and all of us do, we are doing everything possible to protect ourselves from the pain of being unloved should the truth be known. This truth is not necessarily a bad truth. I think it's a bad truth. This truth is not necessarily something harmful, but you fear that by sharing it, your parent may not accommodate you. Now, what is foolish about this belief system? What's foolish is this, friends, that when you let yourself down, you've come to the end of the rope. When people are trusting only in themselves and they let themselves down, you find a teenager with an A minus committing suicide. A hero at school by disappointment in the home. When a teen is struggling at school, but they have a stable home, they can make it. When a teen is struggling at home, it takes patience and special interest from a particular teacher at school to help them pull out of that. Teachers have too many kids on their hands. Do not expect a teacher to do with a class of 40 what a parent is unable to do with an audience of 1. It's your responsibility, parents, to raise those teens in a responsible manner and have the teachers enjoy the company of your teenagers. And so children and adults learn to manipulate relationships. Why do they do that? So they can get love. They can get significance. They can get security. They don't necessarily know that's what they are doing. But they're trying to avoid being hurt and disappointed. And so they'll use different approaches to get to their destination. When these approaches fail, disappointments that result from this create further disappointments. And multiple disappointments will often overwhelm a child. This child soon grows and gets married, as I mentioned, and they carry their suitcase of baggage into marriage. Proverbs 29, 15 and 16. Proverbs 29, 15 and 16. The verse starts by saying, the rod and reproof give wisdom, but a child who gets his own way brings shame to his mother. This child is getting his own way, perhaps because he's disappointed by the way dad and mom handle them. Now he's pushing through his life in his own way. The scripture says there is a way that seems right to a man, but the end of it is the way of death. The disappointed young person tries to go through life finding their own way. Foolish behavior starts early in life. For the young children, the scripture says, folly is bound in the heart of a child, and the rod of discipline will drive it far away from him. Your teenager is no longer a child. We don't use rods of discipline on teenagers. I hope you don't. But when a child is young, their form of thinking is what psychologists call concrete thinking. It takes things at their value, their given value. A child, a 2-year-old, will climb up here and say, Daddy, can I jump? Will you hold me? He has no idea that it may be too heavy for Dad. And he'll jump. And then he'll climb even higher. Can you hold me? He completely trusts. An adult has formal thinking that takes other factors into consideration. The teenage stage of life is where this transition in thinking is taking place. So one day he behaves like an adult, the next day like a child. And we have to be patient because they are growing up. But once disappointments shape the life of a person, that person becomes resistant to change unless they can meet another whose authority supersedes the one who disappointed them. Friends, in a functional home, the home is based on God's word. It's based on truth. The relationships in that home honor one another. The result is peace in the home, and the final outcome is healthy behavior. In a home that's dysfunctional, the base of that home is lies. People tell lies to each other because they're afraid to speak truth. Because when they speak truth, they will not be accepted. And because they tell each other lies, that home is full of pain. And because of the pain, you end up with destructive behavior. So let me go back. The functional home. Truth is the foundation. People honor one another. Peace is the outcome. And functional relationships is the norm. In a dysfunctional home, lies are the foundation. Shame takes place in that home. Pain is experienced every day. The outcome is destructive behavior. Let's look at the top part of our sourceless triangle. What do you think it is? We looked at disappointments. We looked at a basic belief system. And now we want to look at strategies. The strategies that a young person takes into consideration as they go through life. So the C part is guiding strategies. You see, because of the belief system the young person has come up with, they now have to come up with a strategy to survive. The strategy will determine how they behave and what they use to achieve their goals. Remember we said all human behavior is purposeful. So that strategy is purposeful. They help the young person to cope with disappointment and the hostility they're experiencing either in the home or in the school environment. And I keep saying young person, but this sermon is actually aimed at you, the adult. Because you are the adult that the young person is experiencing. Here are a few strategies. Number one, the good kid. The good child is a strategy. This child earns significance by doing good things. They are not doing them because they want to do them. They are doing them because the approval they receive for doing them. There's a difference. They are doing it just for the approval. You go to a classroom, the child leaves home with their pencil kit. Their pencil kit has an eraser, a pen, and a pencil. But this child carries an extra pencil and an extra eraser, just in case their deskmate forgot theirs. That's a good thing, isn't it? Then they get to class, and indeed, the deskmate has forgotten their pencil. And while the child, your child, is getting into their bag to get the extra pencil, the neighbor gives the deskmate a pencil. Now your child is enraged. He's really mad. Why is he mad? Was it the goal to help the neighbor? No. The goal was for me to help the neighbor. The goal is not for the neighbor to get a pencil. It's for me to give the neighbor a pencil so I can get approval from the neighbor. You get the point? So it's not being good. It's not just being good to the neighbor. It's being good to get significance. Is that a strategy that your child is using? Do you use that strategy? Here's another one. The defiant child. The defiant child uses power and intimidation and anger to control their parents. They have an air that makes them unapproachable. They get in the home and they bang the door. And mommy says, don't go in there. He's very upset. And in there they are laughing because they know how to ward off mom. It's a strategy. Because now when you do that, you can't be asked how your day was. The manipulative child. It's another strategy. Manipulative child. Extremely personable, charming, almost to the point of being seductive. This is the kind that other children send to dad. Go tell, when they want something from dad, they send that particular child. And the child will come and put their arm around and says, Dad, I like your haircut. Dad, is this a new tie? They charm their way to dad's heart, and then they ask, Dad, can we go to a movie tonight? Dad has been charmed. He cannot say no. It's a strategy. The whole family knows. If I ask, the automatic answer is no. If we send Helen, she'll get her way. And Helen has learned to manipulate relationships. And this manipulation has gone on even at the place of work. Am I speaking to some adults today? Yeah. Strategy number 4, the enmeshed child. Enmeshed. The child was given up on self and wants parents to manage their life. This child comes from school. They've got homework to do. It's a comprehension. They're supposed to read a page and answer some questions. The child is too lazy to read. They look at the question, they say, Mom, this question has no answer. But son, have you read the passage? Yeah, but it's not there. And mom reads the first paragraph and can immediately see the answer. But son, it's right here. Where, mom? How about this one? At the end of the period, mom has done the homework for the child. The child gets an A on the homework, but always fails the exams. The child is too lazy to read one page, and mom gives in so quickly. Because mom may have been raised in a home where being hard on the child had negative repercussions. So she's giving the child whatever he wants. And that child becomes enmeshed. They can't follow directions. All of life is about directions. They can't read simple directions. They can't bake a cake. The directions are there of how to do it, but they can't bake it. It never turns out right because they never follow directions. The promiscuous child is another strategy. Promiscuous. This child uses sex to shock and disgust parents. This may be in reality or they may be pretending to be sexually active. Maybe this child wants to go to boarding school, and you don't want them to go. So this child begins to hang out with company that doesn't look quite straight. And mom says, hey, we better send to boarding school. The child has achieved what they wanted. The beautiful child is another strategy, who uses beauty and strength to gain approval. But the strategy, really, they're looking for unfailing love. They're looking for significance. They're looking for security. Let me ask you, as grown-ups, this list is not exhaustive, but what strategies are you using to gain love, approval, significance, and security? What are you using? Is it working? The fact that it's working does not necessarily mean it is honoring to God. We need to be parents who honor God. So teenagers are trying to get your love, to get your approval, to get your significant security, and if they fail to get it straight from you, they will come up with a behavior system that gives it to them in spite of who the real person is. The emotional tanks are leaking away, and parents are unavailable or unable to refill those tanks. Yielding to peer pressure or attention-seeking behavior is just part of what you see. Remember where we began? The floating ice? Now you can see what's going on. What lies underneath? Disappointments and basic belief and strategies. And all you see on top is the behavior. Distancing strategies can be employed to avoid hurt and to avoid pain. Broken families, dysfunctional homes. Friends, yesterday I spent time with 25 couples, and we were dealing with a session of processing your anger. And the question I asked the parent, those couples, is to write down a list of their relational network just from their father's side, but I was careful to say also from your mother's, because some of them didn't know their fathers, as many of you here may not know. So they listed their father, their uncles, and their aunts. And I asked them now, look at the marriages of your uncles and aunts, and how many of them are functional. 90% were dysfunctional. 90. And I said to them, unless you do something about your marriage, that's the line it's going to take. When you go through disappointments, unless we process them and come up with a godly way of dealing with them, we will pass on to our children the very thing we hate. And this is going to be passed on to the next generation and the next generation. That's why we call our book, Raising Future Parents. Because your children are more than children. They are, in fact, future parents. So in raising amazing teens don't just happen. They are raised by parents who walk with God, by parents of understanding, by parents who are quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to anger. Remember, parents, the purpose in a man's heart is like deep waters, but a man of understanding will draw it out. May the Lord use these words to stir you up, to walk with him, and to raise amazing teenagers. Amen.